Well, going in a different direction, or the third time we're going in this direction, we're going to do the Cocteau Twins, which is our first time doing them in quite a while. I'm trying to remember the order that I put the tracks in, Josh. I believe I put Heaven
You,
in Las Vegas, right, as the track that you're going to listen to right now.
hmm
Am I
And
correct? Hmm.
yep, and then the opening montage you heard cherry flavored cola.
Yep, not cool.
Cherry
Cherry
flavored
flavored
funk.
funk.
Oh,
Yes,
got it.
funk.
Okay.
That was faux pas. Oh, that's what I get for not writing it down. So I'll make sure I
Come
do
on,
better. So
John.
yes,
We
you're a
can
cherry
redo it
color.
again. Do you want me to?
No, leave it.
No, leave it because it's pretty
Double it.
funny.
It's part of our charm.
Cherry colored funk, and now you're gonna hear Heaven or Las Vegas.
Singing on the fever street. Yeah, to love of all the bongo nights in heaven or Las Vegas. But you must know the rider and the soonest.
Okay, Cocteau Twins. As we mentioned before, we have covered them 3 times in the past. They had a grand total of 9 studio albums, although that could be a couple are EPs, right? So it's kind of, if we go studio albums, I'm looking right now, in terms of what they define as studio albums, it would be 9, yes.
Did we
then
cover? We
some,
did cover them. Did we do? We did Head Over Heels and Treasure. Is that what we did?
no, we definitely did Treasure and, gosh, put me on the spot. Spangle Maker
Yep.
was the other one we did.
Oh,
Yeah.
because that's not on here for
Yeah,
some reason.
that's an EP. That's an EP. That's
Oh,
why.
that's why.
That's what I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was saying. We did one EP and we did one album. So
Okay.
Treasure was the album and Spangle Maker was the EP.
Oh, let me
So
run the
this-
numbers here, John. While
Yeah,
I'm
go
looking
for
at
it.
this. So this is Heaven or Las Vegas by the Cocteau Twins. Comes in at number 34 in the 1990s. It's making it our highest
Wow.
rated album of the week on Best Ever Albums. This is number 2 in 1990, number 164 of all time. It is Cocteau Twins' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It did make Rolling. It's the only album that made Rolling Stone's list tonight, coming in at number 245 there. And Cocteau Twins are ranked at number 128 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
So yeah, amazingly, the Cocteau Twins were formed all the way back in 1979 in Grangemouth, Scotland. So it does not seem like they would be around in 1979. They were very young when they were formed. They were a three-piece, both in their original format and also the format of the band right here. The two pieces that are similar are Elizabeth Fraser on vocals, and then you have Robin Guthrie on guitar. The original bassist was Will Hedgie. He was there until 1983, at which place he was replaced by Simon Raymond, who is the bassist on this album. So in terms of who influenced them, there's quite a few people who influenced them, but we'll talk about why they're an interesting band to couch, because they kind of were the forerunners of a famous type of music. But they're, when often talked about who they're influenced by, you've got the Brian Eno, John Cale, Kraftwerk lane of things. A lot of people mention Robert Fripp from King Crimson, and then Susie and the Banshees was a big influence on the whole band. And Elizabeth Fraser actually had tattoos on her arms of Susie Sue from the Susie and the Banshees. In terms of the similar to, let's start by saying one of the things about the Cocteau Twins is they are often considered to be the forerunners of the shoegaze sound, and so they're most often called dream pop and shoegaze, but they are considered to be one of the earliest dream pop bands and one of the earliest shoegaze bands. So their contemporaries are going to be all the bands from that era, the 80s and early 90s in that lane. But in case you need a couple things, if you've been listening to the show, it's not going to be hard to figure out who, but people like the Jesus and Mary Chain, Galaxy 500, Dead Can Dance. A lot of people have also compared them to a band we covered a couple weeks ago, the Sundays, as well as Kate Bush and some others along the way. So those are some acts we've covered that they're often talked about with. My Bloody Valentine would be another one that gets thrown in there. And then who they're followed by, there's tons of people who mention the Cocteau Twins as influences. Some of those you wouldn't expect because they're in different genres than the Cocteau Twins. One that pops out just for people that might be a little bit younger is The Weeknd. Often talks about how influenced he is by the Cocteau Twins. That came up quite a bit. But other groups in the 90s that come up that were influenced them that were bigger names are groups like Massive Attack, Sigur Rós, Bjork. Those are three that you might be familiar for. Portishead is another one that comes up quite a bit as being influenced by this group. I'll throw in some bands from later eras. Bands like Beach House and Real Estate are also bands that I think share quite a bit of lineage to this sound, as well as like the Ravenettes is another band that comes to mind. So all those would be there. So that's the members, that's the number of groups, that's a little bit of who led them. If we go with three fun facts like we talked about, two of the members of the band were in a relationship for the totality of the band, pretty much 20 years. And that was Elizabeth Fraser and Robin Guthrie. And actually, the band ended when they broke up. And they are very much all on the record as saying the band will never reunite. So I do not believe it was a great breakup. I know Guthrie struggled mightily with substance abuse issues, which I think put quite a toll on the relationship. In case you're wondering where Cocteau Twins came from, it comes from an obscure song, and we mentioned this in the full bio back in the day, but it comes from an obscure song from Simple Minds, one of their deep cuts. Yep. And so that is where Cocteau Twins comes from. And in terms of other things that are interesting, they were actually signed by the British label 4AD in 1982, which was best known then as the home of sort of experimental music, but most notably The Birthday Party, who we covered in an earlier episode. Do you guys remember who The Birthday Party helped to launch?
Well, it's Nick Cave, right?
It is, yes. Nick Cave's original group, yep, before he had the Bad Seeds, was The Birthday Party. So there's some things. Cocteau Twins we're going to start with Josh on this one because Matt and I have had, I think, a more nuanced take on the Cocteau Twins. Josh has pretty famously been not on Team Cocteau Twin at this point. So would you say this one moved you over? There was a little bit of difference in this one compared to the other ones. What'd you think?
Yes, I did like this album. It did move me into support of the Cocteau Twins. I think that this album is markedly different from the previous albums. I think the production is different in some ways. I think for me, there's a good balance between dream pop and more traditional pop. I think there's really good guitar work on this. I feel like the song structures there's a bit more space in them. I feel like they kind of open up a bit and kind of have a more natural ending to them. I feel like on some of the other earlier albums that the songs ended abruptly. I feel like I can hear Fraser's singing contrasted more with the music. I feel like a lot of the earlier albums were more muddied and maybe, I don't know, like not as clear and more ethereal than this album. And so I responded to the fact that it feels more grounded in some ways. I think it's a tighter, I know I said it has more space or opens up some, but I think it's kind of got a tighter construction as well, maybe contradictorily. I like her voice on this, although I can't remember if we said this in other reviews, but I can't tell if she's singing real words or not at times. I feel like it's a made up language or she's singing in a different language or goes back and forth. It is kind of dreamy in that I can pick out words sometimes, but it doesn't, it's kind of like secondary. Like she's using her voice as an instrument in that respect, is that it doesn't really matter, I guess, what the words are. And I feel like overall this album is much more upbeat, which I responded to more, and I liked. I like some of her wailing on this, and like on a song like 50/50 Clown, which was interesting. But really, right from Cherry Colored Funk and Pitch the Baby, I liked it noticeably more than the previous albums. Even songs later on, Fetzapaulik I thought was really good. Wolf in the Breast, also the song after that, I really liked. And what else? The bass, I thought the bass was really well done on this as well. Everything's working better, I think, for me, and just like in harmony more, and distinct, and more. I don't know if more polished is the right word, but just better constructed and more, I guess, pop oriented, more accessible, maybe. And so as a result, I like this. So yeah, moderate thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I think that the other album that we listened to with Treasure, I remember being darker than this.
Yeah.
It's like kind of more of an ominous, kind of creepy, sounding kind of stuff, just with darker tones musically. And this is a brighter sound, right? This is kind of like this is a happier Cocteau Twins, at least, sonically speaking. So, I really
There's
like
6
this
years
stuff.
between, just FYI. That's,
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that was from 84. It's what I was struck by most this week was just how much this sounds like modern indie rock. Like there's so many bands out there. John, you mentioned it, like, the Real Estates, and I mean some Real Estate and Beach House have been around for a while, but like it's just I feel like when I listen to a lot of modern, like if I listen to XMU on radio, there's a lot of bands that are just taking their cues from what the Cocteau Twins were doing, and not necessarily they're not necessarily all shoegaze or dream. I think this is more dream pop than shoegaze.
I would agree.
I would put it more that lane, but there's some shoegaze elements. But so even bands today that would not fit under the dream pop or shoegaze monikers are still like the reverb, the echoey sounds, kind of the wistful kind of production that's done here. You're hearing it so much in today's indie rock now. I would still say it's influential. That stuff's not selling particularly well. It's not like it's not on the top charts or anything like that. Those are a lot of more underground bands that most people are not familiar with. But this sound I hear all the time, and I've been hearing it for a while too. It's not just something that came about. This has been around for about a good 15 to 20 years, I would say, and it just is something that I think speaks to a lot of people. And this does not sound this sounds like it could have come out yesterday because of that. It just sounds like kind of in that lane. So the fact that it came out in 1990, right, when this was kind of not really a thing that many bands were doing, is more impressive. That kind of fits in the lane of like the stuff that John likes with, when you're looking at all the different categories of ranking an album, how influential is it, how ahead of its time. And to me, this is pretty ahead of its time. It's not they're certainly not the only people doing it, but this is done really well. This is a really good record. There's not a bad song on it. I actually think that this might get another one of those records that gets better as it goes along. I mean, I think the 1, 2, 3 punch of Heaven or Las Vegas, I Wear Your Ring, and Thoughts of Politic or whatever that's called is excellent. I love the last 2 tracks, Road River and Rail, and Frou Frou Foxes and Midsummer Fires, which it's a really good way to end the album. Very interesting song titles as well, as I'm saying all these things. It's just like, Charlie.
Well, they always do.
And Pitch the Baby, it's just like, it's not your traditional, it's like, well, that's an interesting song title. So I do like her voice a lot. I like the production, the guitars and the synths together. It just makes this sonic aura that's just really easy for me to get into. And it's something that I feel like I could focus on if I really want to kind of like either put headphones on and really kind of lose myself in the music, or I could have it on back. It's just really nice, pleasant background music as well. So good night album, good day album. I could listen to this really at any time. So I'm thumbs up. This is a great album.
Yeah, I'm pretty strong thumbs up on this album too. It's amazing to go back and listen to Spangle Maker and Treasure, which I did this week, and the production is so much more muddled. A term that I heard describe the Cocteau Twins as I was doing my research a little bit that I think is such a perfect term for them is gauzy, was how it was described. And I'm like, that's a great way to describe their sound, because it is gauzy, but this one sounded even more gauzy. It's one of you guys, I think it was Matt, said this album sounds brighter, which is another great way to describe this, because those earlier albums, they were not industrial or depressive to me, but they were definitely soundscapes that were heavier, darker. And some of that was the production, because it sounded not as upbeat because it was pushed so far back. And Elizabeth Fraser's voice, you could tell it was like a haunting, beautiful voice at times and pretty, but it blended into the mix. it just seemed like everything was being played there, and it was only the guitar that popped out. On this album, what really stood out to me was how everything in its own way popped out. The bass lines at times popped out. Sometimes it just treaded the chorus, but then they popped out. Sometimes the guitar work weaved, I often say weaved in and out, but it's a really good way to describe the guitar on this album, because it does. It weaves in between the bass lines and then Elizabeth Fraser's voice, which is pushed to the front of the mix, which I think makes their sound even more impressive. And actually pretty much all those bands, Matt, that you're talking about kind of said, we're going to take this version of the dream pop, and not do the muddled version of it. And the muddled version very much dates itself to the 80s, I think, because it now strikes me that the dream pop sound that's more muddled like that is an 80s sound, where the dream pop vocals in front becomes more of a 90s and the future sound. There's very little to dislike about this song. There's very few albums that have a song as good as Cherry Colored Funk and end as good as Frou Frou Foxes and Midsummer Fires. That might be the song of the album for me, the last track, Frou Frou Foxes and Midsummer Fires. It's a really beautiful song. It's also a great album ender song. One thing I really loved about this too was this album sounded great on headphones, and this album also sounded great as I was listening to it one day in my car. The problem with this, like when I'm in my car, is that it kind of puts me into like a place, you know what I mean, where it's not really conducive to like, doing things, because that's what good dream pop and to some degree shoegaze does for me, is I kind of want to just sit there and let it wash over me, as we've talked about before. And I quickly realized I need to stop listening to this in the car, because I feel like I'm going to go off the road if I listen to it. It sounded great though, and it was able to move me in that format in a way not other music does. But the three-piece sound here is fantastic. I'm all on board for dream pop. Not that that's a surprise, I think, in terms of my musical taste. When done not as well, it can seem samey, a word we use quite a bit, but nothing about this album felt samey. And you know what? Even the earlier Cocteau albums never sounded samey to me. They were different versions of the theme. Now, sometimes you could argue that it was the same basic idea of that like blurred sound, but the soundscape itself never sounded the same, right? It was sort of a blurred together mix, but there were always variations of what the sound was. But then they would ride that sound throughout the entire track. Here, they're doing a few more changes in terms of tempo and what they're doing song to song, right? Even within the song, there's a little bit more variation. And this is definitely much more of a pop album than the other ones are. Yeah, this felt a little bit more like the major label record, that it could have been, right? They definitely, 4AD definitely upgraded the production budget for this. So yeah, this one gets a pretty strong thumbs up for me. I really enjoyed this album.
I'm glad you like it, Josh. You're coming around here.
Well, it just depends on the album.
Well, you like this, you liked Ride, so it's not all
I
dream
think
pop.
maybe Josh's palette for like I kind of compare it, Josh, to like when I was talking about electronic music that I had like no palette for it, and then I started listening to more of it than I ever thought I was going to, and I'm like, okay, I can now begin to differentiate this stuff, and instead of just writing all of it off, now I'm starting to see the stuff I like because I'm a little bit more educated in it. Do you feel a little bit like that for you?
I think so, but I don't view Ride as kind of the same band as this. I think they're pretty distinct.
No, they're different, but they fall under a similar. That's why genres can be a little dangerous because they, but there's
the vibes are similar while the music is
that's true.
Ride is has more edge than this record does. It's but
it's all about the execution, the excellence of execution, and
there you go.
And they succeed on this one.
Good stuff. Well, the Cocteau, it's the last time I think we're going to be covering them, so they go out with a bang for Josh, which is nice to see. So 3 thumbs up on this one.
For sure.
And I think it's your